The book The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath is a very interesting book. It's about a scholar girl named Esther who wins a fashion magazine contest. For the fashion magazine contest, she goes to New York, and many girls would love to be in her spot, and they would die to have that opportunity to do that. However, Esther doesn't necessarily feel that way. She's very depressed, and at first it just starts out as a sadness, but then after a while it gets worse and worse until it turns into a depression. And Esther is very hard. It's very hard for her to get out of this depression, and she seeks various ways to get out, such as visiting asylums and doctors, and she even considers suicide as a strong option. And she's tried that several times unsuccessfully. And I was first grabbed by this book on page 2 when Esther said, "Look what can happen in this country," they'd say. "A girl lives in some out-of-the-way town for 19 years, so poor she can't afford a magazine. And then she gets a scholarship to college and wins a prize here and there, wins a prize here and a prize there, and ends up steering New York like her own private car. Only I wasn't steering anything, not even myself." This shows how hard Esther's depression was on her and how hard it was for her to overcome it. And although she was given this good opportunity and many people would love for that, she did not like it that much and things weren't working out for her. And also in the book, the protagonist is Esther because she is a main character and its story is told out of her point of view, which at times can be very only according to her. Like the readers wouldn't know other characters like what they really are because she just explains them in her point of view, and that can be a little different than what they really are. And then there are also many antagonists in the story, and one of them is Buddy Willard, which was Esther's ex-boyfriend, who she describes as a hypocrite. And Esther also explains that Buddy came out to be so pure when in fact he wasn't, and this also got Esther mad, and he was one of the causes for Esther's depression. Also, another antagonist in the story was Joan. Joan was always in competition with Esther in college. They competed for Buddy, and they were always fighting each other, kind of. And Esther did not really like Joan that much, and that was another reason for her depression. Okay, and then the main conflict in the story is Esther fighting her depression. Her depression is very serious, and she seeks many ways to try to end it and get better. And it seems as if the only way for that to happen is for her to commit suicide. And she also tries that several times. She tries to hang herself, but there's nowhere to hang the rope. And then she tries drowning herself, but her body keeps letting her up. And also she visits many doctors, such as Dr. Nolan and Dr. Gordon, and she seeks help and attends an asylum. And also she receives shock therapy, which with the first doctor she didn't. With Dr. Gordon, she did not like it all because it was very painful. But with the second doctor, however, Dr. Nolan, she liked it a lot because she just felt like she felt asleep. And also the organization of the story in with chronological order. First, Esther was in New York after winning the fashion magazine contest, and she was, a lot of girls would love to have that, but apparently not her because that's where her depression really started. She she had a friend Doreen there who was very attractive and smart, and she was kind of jealous of her, and just a lot of things just put her down there. And at first, in New York, it was just like when she was sad, she would just take a bath to relieve herself. But then after that, as the story went on, she started doing worse and worse things to herself to relieve her stress. And then second of all, after New York, she went back home for a short while to her home in Connecticut, and she doesn't really like it there. She feels it just all right. And then after that, she goes to Dr. Gordon, and Dr. Gordon gives her shock therapy, which she does not like at all, as I mentioned before, because she would hurt her a lot, and she felt it wasn't supposed to be that way. And then after that, she went to Dr. Nolan in the asylum. And Dr. Nolan, she from the start, she really liked Dr. Nolan because Dr. Nolan knew Esther did not like the visitors at all. So right from the start, she just said no visitors for Esther, and that put her off on a good note with Esther. And she really liked Dr. Nolan after that. And also the shock therapy with Dr. Nolan, she felt like she fell asleep during it and it wasn't painful at all. And she felt like Dr. Nolan also talked to her and listened, unlike Dr. Gordon, who she felt didn't really wasn't really listening that much. And he also Dr. Gordon also had a picture of his family facing Esther, with which Esther took kind of the wrong way because she thought the doctor was trying to show off his perfect life and his perfect family. And yeah, it's about it. And then there's also a lot of flashbacks in the story that help the reader to understand why Esther feels certain ways or why she does certain things and what she thinks about certain people. She has many flashbacks about Buddy, for example. When she was talking with Joan, she would think back about Buddy and all the things that she did and Buddy did and how Buddy treated them both and how now they're both in the same asylum. Also in the book, there were many strengths and weaknesses, and for example, some strengths were how Esther portrayed over her opinions about certain people and things to the reader. She used very vivid words and explained to her what she was thinking in her head in good detail, and the reader could definitely figure out what Esther felt like at certain situations in her life, and that was a really good part of the book. However, one weakness was kind of related to that, how the book was one-sided on Esther's opinion. Like the reader could not figure out what other characters really like because everything in the book was based off of how Esther felt about it, and because it was so descriptive and prominent, the reader would kind of go along with that opinion. And for example, Esther's mom, Mrs. Greenwood, could have been a really nice person, but Esther kind of portrays her in a negative way, which doesn't really the reader can't really figure that out. And also in the book, there's a lot of symbolism. For example, the bell jar. A bell jar is usually like a jar used in a science lab to cover something up. And Esther feels that her life is under a bell jar, and she's stuck, and she can't get out, and she's fighting to breathe under there, and there's nothing that can get her out. And that's one example of symbolism. And another example of symbolism is a baby. And Esther is always worried about having a baby, and she feels that it could ruin her life. And she feels that why should she work so hard for her job and just to quit and take care of a baby all day long. And this is very important to her not to get pregnant because then she'll have to marry a man that she doesn't even want to marry. And also, a baby is important to the story and symbolic because on one of their dates, Buddy brought Esther to a hospital to watch babies being born. And also, Esther's illness progressed throughout the story. As I stated before, like first when she was in New York, Esther would just take baths to relieve herself and to calm down. However, after that, she started getting more depressed and more depressed after more and more things happened to her, and she developed a negative attitude which she kind of always had about people, and she couldn't think of them in a positive way, and everything was just negative for her. And after a while, her illness got to the point where she started trying to commit suicide, and she did this several times unsuccessfully. After and then she visited a few asylums also, which actually got her better. Towards the end of the story, she seemed to have healed a lot, and the asylums and Dr. Nolan really helped him take part in that. And from the beginning, Esther went from being depressed to really depressed and killing herself back to, she got a little bit better, but her future is still uncertain. And also, the mental health system at the time wasn't that good. There were many nurses, and the people who worked there weren't very kind to the patients, and they kind of treated them like prisoners, and they were very abusive with the things they said and did, and they didn't really care for the patients as doctors would today, and because it didn't really matter, they didn't need to be kind to them. They thought there was something wrong with them, and that they did something wrong, and they were prisoners, and the nurses really kind of were like that, and they didn't help the patients too much to get better. It just so happened, though, that Esther got a good doctor in Dr. Nolan that helped her get through her depression. Also, there were many different settings in the book in which Esther was in. To start, one of them was New York, where Esther went after winning the fashion magazine contest. And there she had a boss, JC, who was a very smart, intelligent girl. And in New York also was, as I mentioned several times before, where Esther's depression really hit a bump start and started up to get really bad. And also another setting was in Dr. Gordon's office. And Esther hated Dr. Gordon. She did not like his office. She felt like Dr. Gordon did not listen, and the picture of his family really bothered her. And also another setting was Dr. Nolan's asylum, and in the first asylum she went to after before getting moved up, she liked she liked Dr. Nolan, and Dr. Nolan she liked him, her, and they were off to a good start. And things started to get better from there after she moved up to Belsize and gained walking privileges, which she was allowed out after a certain amount of time. After behaving good and showing improvement, she was allowed out for walks. And Dr. Nolan continued to help her. And also Joan, one of her high school competitors who also dated Buddy, also got moved to was in Belsize, so they talked and conversed a little bit. And also, during that period of time, a woman's role was really not to do anything too special. Their role was to really stay home and take care of the kids, clean the house, wash dishes, do laundry. But Esther thought, why should she do that? She worked so hard, she studied hard, she did everything she should to have a good career, and she didn't want that. She didn't want to have a baby and have to stay home and take care of it and look after it. She wanted to work and do something with her life. But, currently in the depression she was in, it was hard for her to do that. And also, personally, I don't think Esther should leave the asylum yet. I don't think she's improved enough to leave. I feel like if she would leave, she would just revert back to her old ways and everything would happen and her depression would hit all over again. But I feel now that she's getting better, they should keep her in there for longer until she's 100%. And once she's at 100%, then I think it would be appropriate for them to take her out and for her to live a good life and have kids and maybe get married if she wants to. And also, um, her future. It depends, if they let her out I feel like if they let her out of the facility now, her future won't be too bright and she wouldn't do too many good things. But if they keep her in there, make sure she's 100%, and then I think her future would be good, and she would get a good job like she worked for, and everything would turn out good, and she would overcome this. And also, my opinion of the book is that it was a really good book, and it really got my attention. And Esther, it was excellent the way she portrayed her feelings over to the reader, and the way she described all the situations and what she was going through, and everything that was happening. But at times, like in the beginning of the book, it was kind of slow to catch on, and I kind of felt a little boredom. And that was really it, though, because it was a good book. That was a bell jar.